Hello and welcome to today's webinar using Ranorex Studio for robotic process automation. I am John Reynolds, Product Manager at Ranorex, and I will be the presenter for today's session. With me is Timothy McDaniel, Ranorex Pre-Sales Engineer, who will be handling the Q&A portion of the webinar. A few housekeeping announcements before we begin. Throughout the webinar, everyone will be kept on mute. Our team will be answering your questions in the Q&A panel as the webinar goes on. The Q&A panel should be located in the GoToWebinar window, usually found in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. This webinar is being recorded so that you can watch it again later or share it with others on your team who could not join. As long as you have been registered, you will receive a link to watch the recording within about 48 hours after the session ends. So let's take a look at today's agenda. We're going to discuss a brief introduction to RPA, or robotic process automation. We're going to look at some RPA use cases and challenges. We're going to map some test automation terms to RPA terms. And then I'm going to give a brief demonstration of an example Ranorex project which automates a task. And we will also answer some live questions in the webinar as time allows. So first, let's talk about robotic process automation. First of all, it has really nothing to do with robots. RPA is short for robotic process automation, and an RPA solution transfers repetitive manual tasks from human workers to digital workers or software robots called bots. Common bot tasks include data entry, customer service or support, system monitoring, software installation, and more. A software robot can do many things that people can do, such as identify the content of a computer application or website, complete keystrokes, identify and extract data, perform actions such as printing or sending emails. Bots also reduce the chance for manual error in data entry and other repetitive tasks. And best of all, bots can work 24/7, helping organizations manage workload peaks and make most efficient use of the resources. There are so many ways where an organization can apply RPA that one of the initial decisions you'll face is where to start. In a recent survey of about 250 technology leaders, user provisioning was identified as the area where RPA delivered the most value, followed by customer service and support desks, backup and restoration, and system monitoring. User notifications, software installation, and incident management were next, followed by data migration and patch management. So the question is, why would you want to use Ranorex Studio for robotic process automation? Well, here's what over 450 technology leaders had to say regarding the biggest barriers to RPA. Almost 40% say the cost of RPA products is the number one barrier. Another leading barrier is the lack of developers who can actually code RPA applications, followed by the amount of customization needed to automate business processes, and also the lack of RPA code maintenance resources was low on the list, but still made it to the responses. So looking at the first barrier, Ranorex Studio licenses are less expensive than RPA-only products. And if you're already using Ranorex for your testing, then it's zero additional cost to your team. For developing and coding of RPA applications, Ranorex has low-code and no-code options to reduce the need for RPA developers as well as reducing the cost of maintenance. So to address the amount of customization needed, Ranorex Studio has a number of features to increase efficiency, such as a shareable object repository, reusable modules, and support for version control. While that doesn't eliminate the need for customization, it does allow you to develop RPA bots as efficiently as possible. So really, Ranorex can break through most of the barriers that are outlined here. And if you're already using Ranorex for testing, like I mentioned, it's really no additional cost if you have licenses available to implement some RPA tasks and automate tasks using Ranorex. So what does RPA look like in Ranorex Studio? First of all, let's talk about the difference between test automation and robotic process automation. An RPA bot is basically the same thing as a test case, just without the validation step. So in a test case, you're checking to make sure a value is what you're expecting. With RPA, you just skip the validation step and you just go on to, clicking the next button or doing the next task. As a test automation tool, the Ranorex Studio interface is loaded with testing terminology, but you can map testing terms directly to RPA terms. For example, a test case in Ranorex is equivalent to a single bot as an RPA term. A test suite in Ranorex is a collection of these bots, which you would call a job in RPA. So a test run in Ranorex is equivalent to a job run. So now let's take a look at an example in Ranorex Studio where we use some of these terms inside Ranorex. So here is a sample Ranorex Studio project, which I have just titled Budget. So this project is designed to download a monthly budget report and then send it off via email. I just say monthly budget because that's just the title of the report that's in this example. So here I have a smart folder containing 2 recordings. I did not do a setup or teardown, but those can be added as well. But this is a Ranorex test case. But this test case is basically the process that I'm going to do, the test which I'm automating here. So here, let's take a look at my download report. So this recording, I open my browser to this specific page, which I'm going to copy that URL for a second. I add a delay to allow the actual page to fully load. I added 5 seconds here. It may only take 3, but you just want to add enough of a delay to allow the page to load. You don't need to add 30 seconds or a minute. I just added a few seconds here. Then I click on a couple of items, which I have named. I called this the file. This is in the file menu, so it's a menu type. So I just named it menu_file. And then in that menu, in that file menu, I click on the download button. And under the download submenu, I click on the PDF button or option. This will load a page with a PDF export. Then from there, I click on the export button, and then I add a delay of a couple of seconds here. After this recording segment is done, I go on to the send email recording section. Recording. So here, in the browser's footer, I click on the caret option. I scrolled a little too far down. So here I click on the caret button. Then I click on show in folder. And then this opens up the file in my file browser. So then I click on the file item. I right click on it, hit send to. As you can see in the screenshots, the snippets which are captured as I made this recording. I choose mail recipient. And then I add a couple of recipients here. As you see, recipient 1, recipient 2. My mail client did not like me adding all the recipients at once. So here I add 1 recipient, I have a delay, then I add a comma, and then the second recipient. This is just because of the way my mail client was handling the automation. I just added a half a second delay between recipients so I could get 2 recipients in without any kind of hiccups. I could also use a data source if I needed to, but I just set up variables with values here. And then I do perform a couple of actions with the email. So here I end up highlighting the body that's automatically created by Windows. I delete the body of the message, add a custom message body. Then I do the same thing with the subject. And then I click on the send button. So let's see how this would look if I was doing it manually. So I've already copied that URL. I open the URL, the page loads, I go to File, Download, PDF. And then from here, I click Export, which downloads the file to my system. Click on the caret button, Show in Folder, right click, Send to Mail Recipient. I type in a recipient here, another recipient, change the subject, etc. Then I click Send. So let's see how this goes live. And let's see, close everything out first. All right, so I've closed Chrome and my File Explorer and my mail client. So let's close these recording modules. So there's nothing really to see here. So here I have my test case. This is just a single test case in Ranorex. If I had multiple tasks, I would probably split them into separate test cases. There's only one test case here, so I could run the individual test case, or I could run the entire test suite. Doesn't matter since it only contains one test case here. So let's hit run and watch. So the page is loaded. I had a pause here. The report loaded. I had a 2 or 3 second pause. Hit download, open the file, right click, send to mail recipient, add some recipients, change the subject, and it's done. So this is just a general example of how you could automate a process. So if you have files that are sent to your network drive, you can download those, add them to an email, move them where you need to move them, make copies of them, whatever you need to do. You can do that with Ranorex. You don't need to test something with Ranorex. You can use Ranorex to automate your desktop actions. So in this case, I could, if I had multiple reports, I could trigger multiple reports and send them to multiple recipients as needed. A use case I have, which I couldn't show here, I have a couple of CSV exports that I compile and combine, merge some data between multiple systems every week. I have a Ranorex test case which kicks off a script which merges that CSV data together, dumps out a couple of extra reports for me, but I have Ranorex actually download those CSVs from the systems that I need every week, and then kick off an external script which manipulates the data in those CSVs, so then I end up with the 2 reports that I need. Then I could then review and type up the email that I need every week. I couldn't really show that here because there's a lot of data in there that obviously I couldn't share. But that is another example of something that you can do with Ranorex. So you don't even actually have to have your code written in, say, C#. In the example I use myself, I have a Python script that was previously existing. I actually have Ranorex execute the Python script, which does the data manipulation, but I use Ranorex to retrieve the files and then kick off that Python script. So this pretty much is the end of the demonstration here for RPA, but you can use Ranorex for a lot of applications and automation of tasks that you may do on a routine basis. The more frequently you do those tasks, the more helpful Ranorex could be, which pretty much applies to most automation. So if you're doing something on a daily basis, which can take hours to do, or even 10, 15, 20 minutes to do, if Ranorex can cut that down to, say, a minute every time you do it, it can be well worth the investment and save you a lot of time, especially if you're doing something like that every day. So that wraps up our demonstration of using Ranorex Studio for a robotic process automation. Let's move on to some Q&A and address some questions that some users have asked.
Hi, this is Timothy McDaniel, one of the sales engineers here at Ranorex, and I'm kind of looking at some of the questions that's been presented. And one of them was, when will Ranorex be able to get a modern RPA test suite handling like UiPath? Basically, Ranorex is primarily an automation UI tool for testing, but as John reveals here, you can use this in an RPA capacity. And then what it's doing is it is targeting the X path or the Ranorex path to track the elements, whether it's related to an application or a desktop application. And by doing this, and rather than just testing a site, this can actually execute certain functions for you. You could even open up a terminal window, for example, or a command prompt, and you can execute commands, you know, from a command line. I've got various scenarios where I've created things that would execute and run commands and things like that. And then, of course, interacting with different applications and websites. So in that capacity, you can use it in a robotics type capacity. Let me see here. Someone was asking about, you know, having this to use for other, you know, for other users in the environment, you know, your other end users. You know, so long as there are runtime licenses available and they are able to, you know, access that license manager that deploys, let's say, a runtime, then it would be feasible. You would just have to have, depending on how many users, you would have to have comparable runtimes that would allow for that. Remember, with the license manager, once that runtime is used, it's returned to the license manager and is available for use with for another user. Let me see here. Does Ranorex have limitations with accessing other tool suites like Autodesk, etc.? Basically, the best way to know whether or not there are limitations, there's a wide swath of technologies that are supported, and they're listed on our website. I mean, so, you know, usually, especially if it's a web app or lots of desktop apps that are written for Windows and using WinForms and things, there's no problem accessing the elements. But the truest way to know is to download our trial, for example, and test it against those applications and make sure that it can track the elements accordingly. And let me see here. Branch out to a different script based on. Yes, you could build logic, and someone's asking, can you build logic in here that can branch off to a different script based on the response that you get from an input? Now, of course, since you can code in C# or Visual Basic.net with Ranorex, you can do that. You could even have it execute, you know, it could launch another script or another program that has that type of input module or something like that. So there are capabilities through programming that you can do to have some sort of advanced functionality and have some sort of decision tree that comes up and directs them to the proper place. And let me see. Can you give an outlook? Let me see. Can you give an outlook about Ranorex and RPA development and what's planned? I wonder, John, are you available to chime in and answer that one about what we might have on our roadmap or anything for that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, Ranorex being focused on a desktop and web automation, so really any process that it can be tested using Ranorex can also be automated for an RPA. So if you have basically anything you're running on your computer that Ranorex can track and manipulate for testing purposes can also be used for RPA. So for something specific to an RPA task, as Timothy alluded to earlier, as long as Ranorex supports the platform and can, you know, can interact with the tools such as Autodesk. I know we don't have Autodesk explicitly stated on our list of tools, but if your tool is testable, then you can do RPA processes with Ranorex. So you can also extend that with additional code samples. So I don't have a roadmap item specifically dedicated to RPA that I can talk about, but generally, with as flexible and robust as Ranorex is, you can pretty much automate any task that you need to automate.
Okay, all right, thank you, John. Another question was, that inferring between web and desktop, and asking, well, what, and, in regards to mobile, the same concepts do apply with mobile. Of course, mobile is set up as an endpoint device, so you would have to write the program to, or write your RPA case to target the application, or target the browser instance. And do recall, especially if you're using the endpoint object, or either Android or iOS, that it has to be instrumented properly using the Ranorex tool, so that it can identify the objects and be able to use the functionality as far as controlling the device, things like that. So there are a little bit more steps to it when you're dealing with an Android or an iOS device, but you could use RPA in those instances as well. Let me see here. Main complex. Okay. And we've got someone just made a comment. Basically, they've been automating complex production tasks for over 3 years with Ranorex, and they use a combination of recorded modules, user code, and smart folders with condition, and it works great for us. And we thank you, Bernard, for that comment. So, from this customer has been, tried and tested, and they've been able to do a lot of different things with it. Let's see. I want to run most of the task in a loop. Would it be possible in Ranorex? We do support sort of loop instances using what we call smart folders. The smart folders, for example, you can bind to a data source, such as either a CSV file, an Excel file, or even a SQL connector. So you can basically have sort of a data-driven test that loops within the smart folder, and that information is provided. You can also do looping iterations, meaning like if you wanted to have a test case run multiple times, you can run multiple, you can set how many iterations that you want for that to run. So, I would say definitely looping is supported on that one. Let's see. Is there a scenario where Ranorex Studio gets terminated due to some Windows Task Manager? So, yeah, and he was already replied to, but it's an application that can be closed. And there will be instances, just like with any application, that can occur if some error occurs on your computer. I've had it happen to me on occasion. It's not a regular thing, but just like any app can all of a sudden close without warning, that does occur. But that should be more of an anomaly than something that's persistent. But generally, Ranorex is very stable, doesn't close until you need it to close. There's probably an instance where if you wanted for some reason to close out Ranorex and kill it, I'm sure that there's a script that you could execute to purposely kill the process of the Ranorex instance itself. But normally we do, have things when we close an application where we will kill a process by ID, or you can sit there and do it nice and cleanly by doing file exit or hitting the X button in the upper right corner, clicking on that icon or that little element as well. So there's multiple ways to close applications that Ranorex is controlling. But the question kind of alluded to, how do I, or what about Ranorex closing itself or something like that? So let me see if there's anything else. How will you be able to send the record? Well, will you be able to send the recoding of this webinar? Basically, once the webinar is complete, this webinar will be processed and into a video and uploaded to a site, and everyone who attended will receive a link, or anyone who registered actually will receive a link so that they can review this webinar as many times as they wish. And especially, for anybody who had audio issues, this would be a great way to replay the webinar. Let's see. Okay. So this basically will conclude the rest of this Q&A here. Just a reminder, if you want to download a trial of the software, you can go to Ranorex.com. It's a 30-day free trial. There are no limitations on it except like a pop-up screen that says, you know, do you want to continue with evaluation? Kind of advises you how many days are left. But that goes away once you purchase a license from us. But otherwise, it's fully functional. You can record your tests. You can execute tests and everything with the 30-day free trial. And also, if you do have any questions following this, just send an email to evaluation@ranorex.com, and one of us will be happy to respond to it. And everyone here, have a great day, and we thank you for your attendance. And yeah, have a wonderful day.